Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. If you are new on this podcast, we discuss Kalindula music, or this podcast discusses Kalindula music, looking at the origin of Kalindula music, the development of Kalindula music, and discussing where we are today with Kalindula music. My name is Elton Urenda, author of the book, The Theory of Kalindula Music. And I would like to first thank all of you for your wonderful comments on the first podcast that was posted. I received some very overwhelming response from you, the viewers out there, or the followers. I really thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, because this encourages me to continue putting up these podcasts to you. And also, I would like to make an appeal to those that have got important information regarding Kalindula music to really share with us, or just inbox me on my Facebook page, and I'll be able to respond to those comments. Of course, we need to go through those comments and verify them to make sure that whatever we are putting out there is information that has been verified and is correct information. So first, please, can you hit that like button and subscribe so that these videos can come to you as like promised on a weekly basis. And also to notify you as when these videos are posted. So stay tuned as we look at the next podcast that will be discussing the factors that helped with the development of Kalindula music. So stay tuned and follow. Today, our episode is looking at the factors that contributed to the development of Kalindula music. There were certain factors that really contributed to the development of Kalindula music, and this is what we'll be concentrating on, looking at these factors. And I pray that we'll be able to go through all these factors that contributed to the development of Kalindula music. So, without wasting much of your time, I want to look at the first factor that I have. This is in no particular order, please. The first factor that contributed to development of Kalindula music was the World War II. And I'm sure you're wondering, how did this contribute to the development of Kalindula music? How does the World War II fit in the picture of Kalindula music? When we talk about the World War II, obviously we're talking about Africans that went to fight in the war. There were a lot of Africans that left their native lands to go and fight this war. And Zambia included, or Northern Rhodesia included. We had people that left their native lands and went to fight this war. So when these veterans were coming back, or during the time they were fighting in the war, they were exposed to different styles of music that they could hear in the military. They were exposed to the foreign music. They acquired different tastes or some tastes of Western music. And they were exposed to music such as jazz music or blues music. And when they returned, most of these people came and began to influence the music in their native lands. And also, a lot of them, or should I say some of them, had learned how to play the Western instruments, such as the guitar and the banjo. So obviously, you can imagine, as they were returning from the war, these people were able to play this music, and also with the acquired new taste of music, they were able to fuse in the Western style of music into their traditional styles of music. And as the war ended in 1945, as we are told, there was this period was considered to be the period after the war was considered to be a period where there was a lot of economic activities happening, and also a lot of developments that were going on, and also here in Africa, we saw that after the war there was quite a lot of activities are going on. This is a time when also we saw the guitars, the guitars coming into Africa, or into specifically Central Africa, as we are going to look at later. I will discuss this in the next point. So what we're seeing is that these veterans, as they were coming back, they brought with them, some of them, these instruments into their native lands. And it's not surprising that Dr. Mapoma places the origin of Kalindula music to be around late 1940s, right up to the early 50s. And probably, let me just put it from the late 1940s all the way to the 50s and early 60s. This is where he places that this is a period where Kalindula music emerged here in Zambia, or in northern Rhodesia, and to be specific, in Wapula province. So the war did contribute to the development of music in the native places where these veterans went to, or in their native lands where these veterans returned to. And one of the music that comes to my mind that was really linked with a dialect, linked with returning veterans, was Kwela music. We are told that Kwela music was heavily influenced by the war veterans that were returning from the World War II. So this is how we see World War II affecting or contributing to the development of music. And you might be wondering, well, I'm checking my notes here so that I stay on my notes. You might be wondering to say, how did we get this information? This information is shared by a man called Hugh Travis Tracy. He was an ethnomusicologist. And if you don't know what an ethnomusicologist is, it's a big term. An ethnomusicologist is somebody who studies the music of a different culture, or studying the music of a particular culture or a different culture. So Trevor, Hugh Travis, or Tracy as he was popularly known, traveled around southern and central Africa from 1920s up to the 70s. And he was collecting music from these places where he traveled. And here in Zambia, he did a lot of research, and most of it was around Gwembe Valley, with the Tongas who lived in Gwembe Valley. So when it's believed or not believed, he collected around 35,000 songs, African folk songs, that together with his wife, and they created a library where they stored this music, and it's considered to be one of the biggest library of music, ethnic music or African folk music there in South Africa. He was a British-born ethnomusicologist, but lived in South Africa. And this is where some of our music, Zambian music, is stored in South Africa. And he's believed to have popularized the mbira, that is the thumb piano, Zimbabwean thumb piano. So he is an authority when it comes to the study of, if you want to study the introduction of guitar in Central Africa or Southern and Central Africa, he's one of those authorities that you can read about. So you trace you Travis Trace. So this is where the information I'm sharing right now concerning the development of music in Africa, Central Africa, and part of the Southern Africa as well. So the other, this brings us to another point. One of the other things, or another factor that contributed to the development of Kalindula music was migration. Now, when you talk about migration, we should also realize that there were two types of migration that I would like to state here. There was internal migration and external migration. Now, let me talk about external migration. In the late 30s and 40s, areas in Zambia, also Samfya district included, faced or experienced a lot of migration to the mines of people searching for employment or to provide cheap labor in the mines of South Africa, gold mines, and Katanga mines, as well as the copper belt, as we're going to look at the internal migration. So these areas experienced, most of the areas in Zambia experienced migration. And this, when these migrants returned home, these movements played a huge role in influencing the lifestyles and the music of not only the surrounding areas, but we can talk about maybe the entire northern Rhodesia. So what happened is that, like Kazadi, another ethnomusicologist called Dr. Kazadi Wamkuna, who is a Congolese ethnomusicologist, and I believe he's still around, did publish an article where he talked about the development or the introduction or the spread of guitar music. He particularly mentioned two places that were instrumental in the introduction or spreading of guitars in Central Africa. And he mentioned that these guitars were manufactured in South Africa by Gallo. They were manufactured cheaply and they were brought into the copper belt, and then from the copper belt taken to Katanga in Zaire. So we see that the Zambia, by then Northern Rhodesia, became like the point from which these guitars were being distributed to different areas in Central Africa. So when these migrants returned to their native lands, they brought with them the experiences from the places that had been to their native lands. Like I've already stated, they brought records from South Africa of music, of South African music. Mostly it was Kwela music and Marabi music. Also later on Bakanda music, as we've known. But let's talk about the Kwela music records that were brought. But not only those records, but also other Western records to do with, just like jazz and other Western styles of music, and also Latin music as well. This is music coming from Cuba. Music coming from the islands, like maybe generally putting it like music coming from the islands. So these records, they would play them on gramophones. Now a gramophone was like today's hi-fi system, where you could play. They would play using those records, and these gramophones were like, they would also use them for entertaining people. During the events or parties called sundowned, like we talked about last time, the sundowned parties. These were parties that people would go all night long. I didn't mention this, but it's an all night long party, and that's why they called sundown. So they would use this gramophone and play these records. And as people listened to these, it had an effect and really contributed to the music, because people began now to imitate the music that they were listening to, as we're going to discuss much later on when we talk about the influence, the music that influenced Kalindula music. So it's important that we look at some of these factors. And for this, I would like to end here and probably continue with looking at these factors that helped with the development of Kalindula music. So we'll continue in my next podcast. For now, I say please stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.